Dejounte Murray has been traded to the Atlanta Hawks. This is a super fun deal to look at. We've kind of heard some rumors about it for a couple of days. And so I've had my thoughts together on this for a little while in terms of Murray's fit in Atlanta. And now that we know the compensation, it's an unbelievable trade in the first place. So I'm going to begin just with an overall view, and then we'll talk about grades for each team. So overall, the concept here for Atlanta is obvious. They want a backcourt partner for Trae Young. Like, they've tried the Kevin Huerter thing. DeAndre Hunter has been there. Cam Reddish has been there. They've tried complementary options alongside Trae, but this is the first real star, an all-star caliber player that they've brought in to try and play alongside Trae Young. And the concept makes sense in terms of the kind of player that Murray is defensively, someone that plays dissimilarly to Trae, right? Like, we'll talk about, both these guys being on-ball players. We'll talk about that later. But I think Atlanta has had a goal of having Trae off the ball more pretty much since they drafted him, seeing him in more of a Steph Curry role where he isn't so ball dominant. And I think this trade is the biggest indicator that they are going to be moving towards that more and more. Murray is a very talented player. You're not giving up anybody significant within your rotation in this deal except for Danilo Gallinari. You're not giving up John Collins. You're not giving up Okongwu. This is a big deal for them in terms of just adding talent to the roster. And for San Antonio, it's very clear that they are trying to push things towards the future. I wouldn't be surprised if this year or next year we do see Pop retire. This feels like a roster that is transitioning into a new era of Spurs basketball. And for me personally, that's really exciting. And the idea of trading Murray probably isn't super exciting to the fan base. He's someone that, they drafted late in the first round and has developed really well. But for this amount of compensation, they've done really well. So let's just get to it, right? So we'll begin with Atlanta. I've done most of the positive parts here for this Dejounte Murray trade. This is just weird to me. I think if you're just looking at it from a talent upgrade standpoint, it totally makes sense. Like I said, you're not giving up anything in terms of roster talent other than Danilo Gallinari, who's old and probably isn't that big of a deal considering the other wings you have. And Dejounte Murray is good. I'm not trying to disrespect him in any way. I think the fact that they were able to bring him in is fantastic. 3 first-round picks and a swap feels like a lot. I'll just say that. Even if Dejounte Murray was a perfect fit on this roster, it feels like a lot, because to me, if you're trading the 2023 Charlotte pick and your own picks in 25 and 27, even with Trae Young on a long-term deal, that feels like we're about to go and win a championship type move. Think about Drew Holiday being added in Milwaukee. That's the kind of deal that it feels like. And I don't think that that's where Atlanta is in this rebuild. Even if you take out Gallinari and you added Dejounte Murray with the wings that they have, with Capella, with Okongwu, even with Collins, even with that, is this a championship contending roster after adding Dejounte Murray? I don't think so. And that's not to mention the fact that this is a weird fit. Theoretically, the idea here is you get a guy that can play more on the ball in Murray, that plays alongside Trae Young, impacts the game defensively, allows Young to play off the ball more so that your entire offense is not just Trae Young pick and rolls, but you're still going to do a lot of that. Trae had an incredibly historic almost offensive season last year as the primary guy, as the main focal point. And the idea of pushing him more off the ball, I think in theory makes sense. Again, you're thinking about Steph. You're thinking about a team concept that involves more movement. It isn't just reliant on Trae. But when that ball reliant, let's let Trae do everything thing led you to the second best offense in the league last year, that feels like a weird thing to go away from. And they're going to have to do it, because even with Dejounte Murray's growth as a jump shooter, I have question marks about his ability to space off the ball. This is not a seamless offensive fit when Trae has the basketball. I think when Dejounte Murray has the ball, things fit pretty well. Trae Young is going to be a devastating off-ball shooter. He's going to be someone that's going to be able to attack closeouts. It's going to help him until he gets the ball and teams are helping off Dejounte Murray. I just think it's a little bit of a weird fit. If this was a perfect fit and Atlanta felt like a team that was about to make a run at a title, I would love the deal. But given the fact that that's not the case, I'm going to give Atlanta a B for this trade. It doesn't have anything to do with not liking their team. It doesn't have anything to do with not liking Dejounte Murray. It really doesn't have to do with the compensation, because I think in certain scenarios, I would be totally fine with the team trading this many first-round picks in exchange for Dejounte Murray. Again, in that Drew Holiday kind of trade package, right? That makes total sense to me. I just don't think that's where Atlanta is, and as a result, this is a lot to give up. You're restricting your ability to trade future first-round picks in the future, and this feels like, okay, this is our move. Yeah, we can trade John Collins, we can trade DeAndre Hunter, we can do this, we can do that. They still have, some other options here, but it feels almost like you've made the final move before you've made a couple of like intermediate moves to get you there. And this has been something that has been rumored for a couple of days. And to me, that means one thing. That means that they feel at least some bit of pressure, even though he just signed the long-term extension, to push things forward while Trae Young is in Atlanta. I'm not saying that he's going to request a trade anytime soon. It seems like his relationship with the franchise is healthy. It seems like he enjoys being there. He enjoys being the focal point, all that stuff. But this doesn't feel like a move that goes along kind of the timeline that they're on, with them still being such a young team and a team that, in my opinion, is still pretty far away, even with Murray added onto the team, away from championship contention. Now, there is a scenario here where Murray and Trae Young are a perfect fit. And Murray is an incredible defensive player for them, elevates them on that end of the floor. DeAndre Hunter plays a great season and plays healthy. Collins fits in better. Capella is awesome. And the Hawks win 55 games this year. There is a scenario, however slim it is, where that happens. I just don't think that the possibility of that occurring and then that leading to a championship or something similar is worth the investment they just put into Dejounte Murray. That's just me personally. I understand the need to take a step forward, and given the contract restrictions on this roster with some of the guys they've already paid, that is difficult. And I understand there are still things they can do. It's not just, this isn't like, oh, they can't do, this isn't like the Lakers trading for Russell Westbrook. Like, they can still do other stuff. They can still trade Collins, Hunter, whatever the case may be. This just feels a little early for me. And even as much as I like Dejounte Murray as a player, feels like, given their situation, a lot of compensation. On the other hand, San Antonio, round of applause. I love it. After years and years and years of myself and other people begging for this team to just hit the reset button just a little bit. Like, you don't always have to be competent. You don't always have to be, pushing for 45 wins. You don't always have to be a playoff team. Like, it's okay to take a step back. And this is a leap back. Like, this to me is the kind of move that signals that this franchise is willing to start moving in a different direction from a philosophy standpoint, enjoying the rest of the NBA in modern team building. This kind of compensation is the kind of stuff that sets you up incredibly well for the future. And yes, losing Dejounte Murray is unfortunate. He's an all-star caliber player. He's still pretty young. He's on an affordable contract, although a contract that will be ending relatively soon. Atlanta's going to have to give him a new deal here in the next couple of seasons. Even with that said, like, if you're getting basically salary cap filler in Danilo Gallinari and 3 first-round picks and a swap in exchange for Dejounte Murray, and you're like assuming you're not a championship contender, which obviously San Antonio isn't, that's fantastic compensation. There's a reason why they put that number on him, because they liked him. They wanted to keep him, and Atlanta was so desperate to go out and get him that they were like, okay, fine. Like, you guys have overwhelmed us with an offer. We're down to trade away Dejounte Murray. They still have other guards in wings and things like that they can still potentially build around. They drafted Primo last year. They had a couple picks this year that could be interesting. Keldon Johnson is still there. It's still a roster that I think can really progress here over the next couple of seasons. And potentially they're going for one of these top picks in the draft upcoming, because obviously they traded away their best player for picks. Like, that to me signals a team that is looking at the top of this draft this upcoming season and then really starting to turn some things around from there. This to me is an A+ for San Antonio. And yes, I'm giving them some extra points here because I'm just so excited that they finally decided to join everybody else in terms of their team building philosophy. It's an A+. If I could put multiple pluses on it in the thumbnail, I would. Like, to me, it is a home run trade for San Antonio to get this level of compensation for a player that is an all-star but is not an all-NBA caliber player at this point, and needs a new contract in the next couple of seasons, and quite frankly is a weird fit on the team that they are trading him to. If I was San Antonio and Atlanta called me and offered me this deal, I would have done it 100 times out of 100. If I'm Atlanta, I would have had some real pause if San Antonio had called, right, just out of the blue, like, hey, you want Dejounte Murray? We want Gallinari. We want 3 firsts and a swap. I'd be like, that feels like a lot. Like, put yourself in that scenario and think about what you would have done if you were each of these teams. And that, to me, translates how the trades should be graded. This is going to be a really, really interesting storyline to follow, because as much as I like Dejounte Murray, I think there's a real possibility that Trae Young having to adjust his role and those two guys potentially not fitting extremely well, and the investment they just made in Dejounte Murray and the investment they made in Trae Young's contract last offseason, I think there's a real possibility that this doesn't go well and this isn't a great fit and it's awkward and it's uncomfortable. And if there's anything we've seen over the last couple of years in the NBA that lead to unhappiness and weirdness, it is an uncomfortable fit, specifically in the backcourt and amongst star players. My last point here is this. I don't want this to come across as Dejounte Murray disrespect. Dejounte Murray is a very, very good player. And had he ended up in a couple of different situations for slightly less compensation, this is an A or better trade. Trading for Dejounte Murray is a good idea. I just think it is less of a good idea if you're Atlanta, given the needs of your roster, and almost irrelevant of the situation unless you are about to be a championship contender, unless you are, again, like Milwaukee, trading for Jrue Holiday. With the exception of that situation, I think 3 firsts and a swap is too much, in my opinion, for Dejounte Murray, given the contract situation coming up, regardless of fit on the roster. This is a super weird one, and honestly, it's really fun. Like, to have this the day before free agency starts, to have this have its own day where we can all just kind of focus on this and talk about this is really, really fun. And I cannot wait to see the reaction of everybody else and how this plays out for Atlanta the rest of the year. And I guess Spurs fans, like, we're going to be seeing a lot of, Josh Primo, and it doesn't look like Lonnie Walker's coming back. We're going to be seeing a lot of Keldon Johnson. I also don't know what this means for them for DeAndre Ayton, because I don't really know why you would take this massive step backwards, trade away Dejounte Murray and get all these future picks and then pay DeAndre Ayton $35 million. Like, I don't really know that makes a ton of sense. So it kind of feels like, whether it be Detroit or San Antonio, like, a lot of the Ayton teams are kind of falling into the background here, which is probably opening up a scenario where Phoenix, manufactures a sign and trade where he ends up somewhere else and they can get some compensation back. Because at this point, I'd be very surprised if Phoenix matched any DeAndre Ayton offer. That's getting into some different situations. But I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say about this trade down below. What a super, super fun deal.